This is the Out of Time Film Podcast, where your hosts Tom and John discuss everything from blockbuster films to TV and games like there's no tomorrow.
Here we have the infamous towel that Tom has worn during, I don't know, just towel.
Imagine if I made that the opening of the podcast.
Yeah, just make that as the opening.
Oh,
hello.
Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Out of Time Film Podcast. My name is Tom, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host John. And this week we are talking about John Wick Chapter 4.
Yeah, so you haven't seen this film till recently.
Until literally 20 minutes ago.
I saw this earlier, way earlier, back in March. And I remember when everyone was like, I don't think this film's going to be that good because, let's be honest, John Wick 3, it was a bit silly. It wasn't really going anywhere with the story. John was just running around, just shooting everybody. I mean, that is the main plot for the whole series. But however, this one actually surprised me in a different way. And yeah, what do you think before we go into full spoilers?
I would agree with you about John Wick 3. I wasn't a huge fan at the time. I think the John Wick franchise is something that I think it's fine. It's not, in terms of action franchises, I'm much more of a Mission Impossible or a James Bond fan. I think they have a lot more for me. So as you say, I kind of avoided this at the time, and it was, 2 hours, 50 minutes. I was like, nah, I can't be bothered. And when I sat down to watch it just now, I was again like, oh God, is this really going to be long? But to be fair, I had a good time. I enjoyed it a lot. And I don't know, maybe if that's because I'm older and I have more appreciation for like the action and the way that the film is made than I did when I watched the first three. But yeah, I had a really good time with it, and I was surprised. I knew that it was considered good, but yeah, I really, really liked it.
Yeah, I agree. At the time when I was watching it on the super screen, and watching it on the super screen was just a different experience to watching the other John Wick films. The first John Wick, I mean, that is more story based in the way of like John has lost everything, and then we got to chapter 2. I mean, it was good, but I wish there was something with it. And then chapter 3, there's some good action, but I just don't feel like that was the best. But this one, I had a great time. I was just completely overwhelmed by the amazing cinematography in this film and the banging soundtrack as well. And I just couldn't believe that this one really actually stuck with me for the rest of the year. I was like, man, that whole sequence, there's different sequences that I love in the film. And yeah, should we get into it?
Absolutely. So full spoilers ahead for anyone who hasn't seen it. Briefly explain the plot for those who don't know.
With the price on his head ever increasing, legendary hitman John Wick takes his fight against the high table global as he seeks out the most powerful players in the underworld. From New York to Paris to Japan to Berlin. That is the brief description.
Fantastic. So yeah, I would kind of describe the first three as diminishing returns. I would say that I really liked 1, I liked 2, and I thought 3 was fine. I didn't give them a rewatch before this one, but I agree with you. I think that this one, like, really the thing that stands out is the cinematography and the way that all the action is framed. Like, when it comes to John Wick, plot is just scene dressing. Really, like, the plot doesn't really matter. We're here for cool action, and cool action we get because I think that this movie really delivers on that premise with, as you just said in the description, all the different countries that we go to and all the different places. And I think there's a really good use of lighting and color in a lot of these action sequences, and they're always finding ways to top themselves. And I think that there are some really great highlights in this movie through the action.
Yeah, I really like, as you said, about like the lighting and the mise en scène in each different country, which is so kind of refreshing in the series. There's some really good shots in the series, but this one really stand out to me with the lighting, especially the Japan sequence, like when it goes in the lockdown mode with the green lighting. It was just really interesting where the direction they took as well with the cinematography. I loved how they showcased every country across the world and make it, like, this is John Wick's world that he's trying to get through and he's trying to fight. My favorite is the Paris sequence, the massive roundabout. And one of my favorite songs in the film was nowhere to run. And it was a great reference to the Warriors. I
Oh,
really
that's what
got
I
that.
was gonna say. Yes, I absolutely loved that. There's nothing better than when a movie says the title of a song and then plays that song. And when the radio announcer says there'll be nowhere to run, and then they start playing nowhere to, like, that was just so exciting.
Brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's like at the end of Glass Onion when they start playing Glass Onion, and I was just like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like that kind of thing. I just think is
Yeah. I
amazing.
love that.
Yeah, that whole
And
sequence on the Champs-Elysees, and I mean, they didn't actually shoot it
Chandelier
there,
does
but
it.
like that whole sequence on the Champs-Elysees and all the cars and people are constantly being smashed into cars. And
Yeah.
it's so chaotic, but in such a delightful way. I think
Yeah.
that every action scene is so much going on, but they still keep it focused and they keep it memorable in a way that, like, you got to commend this series for every single movie having distinct action set pieces that you can kind of highlight. They know how to keep it intriguing. There's
Yeah.
literally a moment at the end when he's climbing up the steps when somebody kicks him down the steps. And
Oh
I
my
was watching
God.
it with my friend, and my friend said, "Oh, wouldn't it be funny if he just rolled down all the steps?" And he rolled down every single step. And
Legend.
they really went for it. And I just love that. Like, they're like, okay, so we're on the steps. Obviously, we've got to make the best use of it. And so they really do have people just rolling around. And,
Yeah.
as I say, they're on the Champs-Elysees. It's a huge roundabout. So they're just going to have cars going through the action scene the whole time. Or even, as you say, when they're in Japan, they're like, we're going to have like a trophy room with all these swords and nunchucks and all these like big screens that we can have people smashing through. And they're just using all of the tools at their disposal to the
Yeah.
absolute maximum.
Yeah. And my favorite shot, I was completely mind blown when John Wick drifts around while shooting around in the Chandelier, and he's just drifting while shooting. And I was like, it kept going like with the cinematography, and I was like, oh my God, I was just completely mind blown. If you see me, I'll be like, what the heck am I watching? This is
That
too
was
awesome to
so
watch.
cool.
How did they do this shot? Mostly it's special effects. There's a great video on it, by the way, on the Chandelier sequence with its special effects. It was like, oh wow, that was seamless. That is clean. And that shot just took me away. I was like, wow, this is cinema with its capacity of like action, giving homage to kung fu movies, Hong Kong movies as well, like Jackie Chan and stuff. And yeah, it really just blew me away with its sequences as well, especially the other sequence with the fiery dragon shotgun thing. It turned out to be like a video game. You know what I mean? That whole
Yes.
sequence. Yes.
Yeah, that's you see
Oh, wow.
when you were talking about your favorite shot, I thought you were going to mention the bird's eye. For me, that was the one.
The bird's eye. That's great.
I'd heard tales of the bird's eye shot. I remember back in March, a lot of people were, getting really excited about John Wick, and on Twitter, I saw a lot about the movie. Unfortunately, I did have the ending spoiled for me, but the whole time,
Twitter?
yeah. So when they were
Yeah.
in that house and the camera kind of started to move up, it suddenly all came back to me. I was like, oh my God, this is the bird's eye scene. And when that camera settled, looking down on all the action, and Wick is using this gun, it's almost like going off like fireworks every 5 seconds. It was fantastic. It really was just like another level of insane. And there are conversations, I think, about a John Wick 5. Obviously, it's
Yeah.
how is that going to happen? I have no idea, because obviously, this film ends on such like a final note. But if it was the final one, they really have used all of, like, it feels like there's nowhere else they can go. They really have topped themselves in every capacity.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter about the bird's eye view, and everybody was raving about it. And I couldn't believe that you got spoiled about the ending, because not only I didn't want you to get spoiled about John Wick, I mean, I didn't mind that, but the one thing that was really annoying was that the director, he spoiled the ending of Cowboy Bebop before you finished Cowboy Bebop.
I was literally watching Cowboy Bebop, and then discussing film on Twitter was like, and so John Wick's death is actually inspired by another death in Cowboy Bebop. I'm not going to say it just in case anyone
No, we're
listening
not gonna
hasn't
spoil
watched
Cowboy
it.
Bebop. Do watch it; it's great. And the director is going to be the stunt coordinator for the new anime series Lazarus, so he's going to be working
Yes,
on
that's
that.
right.
exciting.
Chad Stahelski started as a stunt coordinator, and I think
Yeah.
he really understands action scenes, and that's why they are so famous in John Wick. I think the way that he moves the camera, and he kind of understands a certain dynamism to it, if that's the right word. Like, I think
Yes.
that really works nicely. I respect the hell out of the guy.
Yeah, the guy knew what he was doing. And one of the best things about the John Wick series is that the cinematography is consistent, really. In John Wick 4, it really stands out, but it's really consistent. Like you never miss a beat, or, the camera is trying to make kind of like a rhythm within, the fight scenes or the sequences as well. Like you're not missing anything, but it's like, wow, there's a lot that's going on, but in a really good way. In the Taken series, the one with Liam Neeson, there's one Taken shot where he's trying to get over the fence, and that took 22 shots with a shaky camera.
Oh
The
yeah,
one,
the shaky camera.
the
My
shaky cam
God.
in action sequences.
I'm really happy
Yeah.
that we've moved away from that, because
Yeah.
obviously shaky cam can work, but I think a lot of films tried it, and maybe aside from the Bourne movies, nobody really seemed
Yeah.
to understand it, or be able to recapture what the Bourne series did. And I think that John Wick is one of those series that has kind of come out of nowhere and just threw these really cool action set pieces. Like, as I said before, the scenes and the plot, they don't really matter. Like, there's a whole bit in the movie where, for whatever reason, the only way to get this duel, John has to become part of a family. And so the family's like, yes, we will make you part of the family, but first you got to kill the guy who killed my father. And so there's this whole 20-minute detour. There's no like thematic reason, and there's no narrative reason, but it's just a cool scene where
It is a cool scene.
where Mr. Nobody and Kane and John all play cards with this German gangster who he then ends up fighting in a club with like water dripping all over them. And it's just cool. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really need to be there. I tried to figure out the card game. I couldn't understand it.
I couldn't understand the card game.
How does he have 5 twos? Does that mean there are 2 decks? I don't even know. But like, it was just really cool. The fact that whole sequence, it was awesome, and it didn't have any relevance, but I loved the hell out of it. And that's kind of the charm of this kind of movie.
Yeah, and one of the great things about this film is Donnie Yen. He's a legend in this film as Kane. And
oh, what a guy. I mean, come
what
on.
a guy,
Come
Kane.
on. Listen, you can't go wrong with Donnie Yen.
When I saw that teaser for John Wick 4, I was like, now they want me back into the series now.
Every time I get out, they pull me back.
Yeah, exactly. And he was another highlight of the film. He was just so funny, but also had some awesome sequences as well. The first one that he was fighting in Japan in the Osaka building, it was really cool to see, this blind assassin who was going against this whole entire army inside the building. And the card game is funny as well because, you couldn't see what was the card. It was just...
Why do Western movies love to cast Donnie Yen as a blind warrior? Like, both this movie and Rogue One are just like, yep, Donnie Yen is blind.
Oh, yeah.
Deal with it.
He did
yeah,
that
right?
as well. It's weird. I mean, like, what was that quote again? Like, if I had a nickel? The quote?
Yes. If I had a nickel for every time that Donnie Yen was blind in a Western action movie, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
Yeah, but
it is odd, but also like you can't
odd.
complain about him being there. And I think we're talking about how great the action is, and the action is great, but to the movie's credit, it also has some good emotional stakes, and I think the characters are all really interesting. And I think Kane is interesting in that sense that there's a question of his honor and a question of his loyalties, and all he really cares about is his daughter and his daughter's safety, and that's how they managed to drag him back into being an assassin. And at the end of the day, his allegiance is just to his daughter's own safety and not to anyone else. And I really appreciated how at the end of the day there was no bad blood between him and John, because John understands exactly the deal. He understands this life, and I think that we're crafting this whole kind of world, and I think that the dichotomy between the two, kind of like the heroes and the villains, it comes right down to what Ian McShane's character, whose name I can't remember, what he talks to with Lance Reddick's character. Lance Reddick is joining him, and Ian McShane says, "You're so loyal, and that's kind of the greatest thing in this business, to be loyal, even if it kills you." And it does kill him. And that's an interesting like thread throughout the movie that we also see with Mr. Nobody, who is also
I keep asking,
like,
I'm sorry, is he called Mr. Nobody?
He only says his name is Nobody, and so everybody calls him Mr. Nobody. And as soon as I heard that, I was getting Fast and Furious flashbacks.
Yes, exactly. I was like,
yes.
Is he trying to reference that? But he's called Tracker what Google
Okay,
because I was like
well,
getting flashbacks. So I was like, oh my god, Mr. Nobody. But you can
we can call him Mr. Nobody for the
Kurt
sake of
Russell.
for whatever. Maybe
Kurt
he was
Russell
Kurt
just come
Russell.
into the place, be like, "Hey, everybody, I'm Mr. Nobody."
Oh no, wrong movie. Yeah. But he at the end he decides that his loyalty lies with John because John saved his dog from being killed, which I thought was a great moment, of course, because John understands the pain of your dog, something that you love so deeply, being murdered in front of you. And I really appreciated that as well, because again, we're seeing while Bill Skarsgård, the villain, his whole thing is about money and about power and about pain. And he says there are three types of people: those who have nothing to live for, nothing to die for, and something to kill for. And it's pretty interesting as well, because the whole thing kind of is a huge contrast between the heroes and the villains and what they believe and what they have honor for. And even though the John Wick franchise does lose some of its emotional stakes and some of its metaphors, I think this one managed to maintain it to quite a good emotional climax.
Yeah, especially for the end. He did everything that he wanted to do, but he died. It's very emotional, and as what Chad Stahelski was talking about, is inspiration for the ending, which was Cowboy Bebop, which I'm not going to spoil, which I just did in the other cut.
There's an alternate universe, something that I just removed in the edit, where John does a big spoiler.
Please do watch Cowboy Bebop. Yeah, and there was one emotional moment where John was talking to Winston before the whole Paris sequence, talking about like the life that he tries to go back. I completely forgot the dialogue, but I sensed there was some emotional feelings. I sense some empathy. I can must feel something. No,
You got an
yeah,
echo back from March, and you're like, ah, yes, the super screen.
I
No,
must be empathy. I
there is a
am as an
moment.
empath. I must feel things.
There is a moment at the end where they talk about, well, it's not really the end, it's like 45 minutes before the end, but Winston and Laurence Fishburne and John, they talk about gravestones, like, what do you write on a gravestone? And Winston was saying that he wanted to put on Sharon's gravestone a friend, because that's what he was. And John says that I want my gravestone to say loving husband. And at the end, that's what we see, that he died. And that's like how he remembered. He remembered living as a loving husband. And I think that all like works really nicely because of this whole like idea of, was he a good man or not in the end? That's a really interesting angle as well. Like Laurence Fishburne says, like, do you think he's in heaven or hell? And it's like, who knows? Because he tried to keep that honor and he tried to keep that loyalty. And there's this idea of no matter how hard you try, you can't escape. And it's almost similar to what we were talking about in Nimona last week. You can't change who you are, and you are stuck being this assassin and stuck being a killer. Like, that's all so interesting. I kind of wish the film goes a bit more into that. And obviously, I'm not going to say no to another action scene, but like, I think that that's a really interesting angle as well.
Yeah, it's a very prominent theme across the John Wick series. He's trying to get back to the life. Well, he lost everything in the first film, with his wife and his dog, and it gets even worse for him. So, like, it goes all tumbling down. And what was I gonna say? I just wait. No,
He goes tumbling down all those steps.
Wait, hey! I lost my thought.
We are gathered here today to remember John's thoughts that he once had, and we believe it would have been a beautiful thought. If he graced us with it, we would have 1 million subscribers.
Because I said
and
it
would have paid for all of our lives.
Oh, no, I remember.
Well, you have it.
I came back. Wait, my thoughts came back. It's very reminiscent to Dante. It's the seventh something of hell. He tries to get back to life. So it's very reminiscent of that.
Ah.
Stahelski was talking about. So
yes, yeah. Nice. Okay, I'm with you. I think that's interesting as well, because the villain believes that he has control over all of this. He himself doesn't matter in the grand scheme. I thought it was really interesting how at the end, Clancy Brown, who,
Clancy Brown, the legend, the
come
goat.
on. The living legend that he is, as soon as Bill Skarsgård is dead, Clancy Brown's like, okay, that's it, we're done, bye.
We're satisfied.
Like, yeah, he doesn't like care. Nobody cares about Bill Skarsgård. And what I think is interesting is that Bill Skarsgård thinks that he has more power than he has. He thinks he's more important than he is, when actually he's nothing. He's just a coward who refuses. And I can't remember any of the John Wick villains, but I think Bill Skarsgård will go down in my memory as the most interesting and the most memorable, because I think he puts in a great performance. performance and because of how interesting he is, he thinks he has so much power and he thinks that he can control people, but really he doesn't have their loyalty. You can't just threaten somebody and think that they will be by your side in the way that they will if you prove yourself. And he gets Kane to shoot John in the duel at the end because he won't do it himself because he's scared, and he only picks up the gun when he thinks that John is down, and in his own hubris that doesn't even work. And I just love that idea that the villain is such a it's a simple thing, but whenever the villain is the direct opposite of whatever the hero stands for, I think it works really, really well in these kinds of situations.
Yeah, and as you said, that hubris came to a downfall when he tries to shoot John, and then Winston's like, "You arrogant asshole. He didn't shoot," and then Keanu shoots Bill Skarsgård's character. And he says consequences, so like Bill Skarsgård's character doesn't realize about the consequences, and power leads to consequences. So yeah, it's a very prominent theme as well with consequences.
Yeah, it's such a fitting death that John Wick doesn't go down in a huge action sequence. He goes down in a exactly. He goes down in a very small way. You know, he just sits on the steps as the sun rises, and his last thought is about his wife and what he did. He's settling his feud, and he's righting wrongs, and he's making sure that all of his friends have everything that they need. And he dies like that. He doesn't die in a blaze of glory. And I think that's perfect for his ending. And who knows if they're going to make a fifth one, but I think it's weird that that is even in the conversation, because to me, this is like a pretty definitive ending and a good ending in that. Nothing's confirmed, but it just makes no sense. Like, sure, if you do a spin-off or something, but I think John Wick's story is done. And I think all things considered, it ends well. I think the John Wick story across these 4 movies is a strong one. And I think that this movie will make the other ones better.
So
exactly.
it's just like, oh God, do you hear about Toy Story? So this is kind of like this thing that's happening with Toy Story now.
Oh, don't talk to me about that.
Nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide.
No. Oh, God. If anyone listened to our Elemental video a couple of weeks ago, we spoke about Toy Story 5, and I made the promise that we'd be doing all of the Toy Story films in the podcast. And I still think we will do that, but God, Toy Story 5 does not sound exciting. There was a recent report about it having Andy's new family or something, and it just sounds really...
Why?
Really disappointing. But anyway, John Wick.
What else? Oh, I wanted to say that the score was a banger. Who did the soundtrack? Oh, Tyler Bates.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. I think he did a good job of that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, John Wick 4.
Fantastic. What are you going to give it out of 10?
I'm going to say an 8.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. 8 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you liked it and you're listening on YouTube, you can like and subscribe if you want to see more. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can follow and give us a 5-star review if you think we're worthy. Next week, it's our final catch-up film, and we will be doing Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. This one I've seen before, and I'm very excited to rewatch. It's a bunch of fun. And you can send us an email, oursteinefilmpod@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, and ask us any questions. We'll answer it right here on the podcast next week. And you can follow us on Instagram, oursteinefilmpod, to see our incredible thumbnails from Zain Afzal, on Twitter for more thoughts from me, and TikTok to see edited clips, which are also on Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. And you can find links to all that in the description below. Thanks to Jones-Meyer for the excellent theme and Ronan Phillips vocals, as always, and I think that is everything.
That is everything. Take what you're given.
Give nothing back.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.